are not only reaching age 100, they're doing so
Talking
with
about
vitality,
Sardinia
riding their
and
bike at
centennials.
102, chopping wood at 106,
ILTM.
and beating a guy 45 years younger than him in an arm wrestle, and that was at 7 in the morning after a glass of red wine. When you're 106, you can get by with that. So, I work with a very clever researcher in Sardinia named Gianni Pes, and between the two of us, we have surveyed about 300 centenarians to find out what they've done most of their lives and then correlate it to reaching age 100. And we found 3 things that most highly predict living to 100, and I'm going to tell you them in reverse order. Number 3 is the slope of the land in your village. It turns out the steeper the village, the longer you live. Number 2 is how many daughters you have. Turns out the guys most likely to reach age 100 have 5 or more daughters. Now, we don't know if that's because daughters tend to take care of their aging fathers, or if it's because if you can survive 5 adolescent girls, making it to 100 is no problem. But the biggest predictor actually was the profession. The farmers in Sardinia, as it turned out, live no longer than their Italian counterparts. It's the shepherds that are living so long. So my photographer and I embedded with a few of these shepherds to see how their lives unfold. And we expected to see people live these really rigorous lives, but they don't. Shepherds in Sardinia sort of wake up when the sun's warm. They spend a few hours with their animals. They'll pasture their animals, maybe 3 to 5 kilometers, have lunch, take a nap. On the road, they've developed foods that won't spoil when they're in the field for sometimes days or weeks at a time. A type of bread made out of whole grain durum wheat called carne de musica. Cheese from their own sheep, grass-fed animals, very high in omega-3 fatty acids. When they're back in their villages, they eat a variant of the Mediterranean diet, very plant-based. Interesting, they have a type of wine that has the highest levels of polyphenols, those artery-scrubbing antioxidants of any other wine known in the world. It's usually homemade, nothing like dirty boots to add terroir to the wine. This quote-unquote heart medicine is applied with great regularity a few times a day, a little in the morning, a little with lunch, and then at night with their friends, a 3rd or 4th time with meals. They do eat a little bit of meat, never beef, very little poultry, but pork is a celebratory food, usually eaten during festivals, or on Sunday after church they'll eat a little prosciutto. But they eat it only about 5 times per month on average. Most of the time it's a pretty strict plant-based diet. Because this was a Bronze Age culture pushed up into the highlands, they had to develop a zeal for family and community. I would say it's nearly a fanatic zeal for family. Family is always first, before the career, before the hobbies, or before whatever sports team. Unlike in the United States, where you sort of reach your pinnacle of status at about age 30, here the older you get, the more celebrated you are. You see 80, 90, and even 100-year-olds who are still advising the mayor. They're on city councils. They still live with the family. It would shame a Sardinian family to put their aging mother or father in a retirement home. Instead, they're kept at home, and families harness the wisdom of elders for both agricultural purposes. Remember, 80, 90-year-olds, they possess the most wisdom. They've been through the economic downturns, the deaths, the divorces. They have the resilience. It's almost always the grandmothers that possess this special diet of longevity here. I would say the most important feature of which in Sardinia is their sourdough bread. We normally think of sourdough bread as kind of junky food, or bread, white bread anyway, is junky food, but this Sardinian sourdough bread has been shown to lower the glycemic index, or slow the rate at which your body absorbs sugar by about 25%, and almost every single meal includes a piece of this sourdough bread. The grandmas not only possess the culture that has been passed down for centuries, but also the know-how on how to make it. It turns out that keeping grandmothers close to family, something called the grandmother effect, has shown that children who live in those families with the grandmother actually have lower rates of disease and lower rates of mortality. So it sets up this beautiful sort of virtuous circle. Older people feel needed, they're put to work, and younger people benefit from it. On the other side of the planet, we found our second blue zone, about 1,200 kilometers south of Tokyo, on the archipelago of Okinawa. We found the world's longest lived women, about 30 times more female centenarians among a cohort of women over 60 here than any place else in the world. Okinawa has produced the longest lived people in the history of the world. Now, part of it is their diet. There's one food that an Okinawan centenarian ate principally their entire life. About 60% of their caloric intake until they were about 70 was one food. Anybody want to take a guess at what that food was? Somebody said rice? Rice? Seaweed? Seaweed is part of it. The answer is actually purple sweet potato, something called emo. If you're stuck on a desert island and you could pick only one food, this is the food you should pick. Full of complex carbohydrates, beta-carotein, there's protein. You can live off of it for the most part. This was 70% of the dietary intake in Okinawa until about 1970 because all other plants were blown away by typhoons that come through 2 or 3 times a year. The underground emo survived. They also eat about 8 times more tofu than we do, and the Okinawan tofu is said to be the healthiest. It's certainly the most firm and concentrated. But more important than their diet is, once again, their surroundings and their cultural norms. I asked you that question, raise your hand if you had at least 3 friends you can count on a bad day. Where I come from in America, we're not born into a culture that guarantees we're going to have a social network. We have to work for it. In Okinawa, you're sort of born with it. When you're a kid, 4 or 5 years old, your parents cluster you around 3 or 4 other friends. There's a ceremony, and there's a tacit commitment that you're going to travel through life with those 4 or 5 people. That circle is called a moai, M-O-A-I, moai. And once these people cluster up, if things go well for you, good crop, or you get a raise, you're expected to share it. And likewise, if things go south, parent dies, kid gets sick, you get divorced, you automatically have this social network behind you, this group of people that has your back. The reason I show this picture right here is these 5 girls have belonged to the same moai for 97 years. Their average age is 102, and they get together every night, gossip, drink sake, argue about who that hot guy liked best back in 1941. But they continue to connect every day, and if one of them gets sick, the other 4 are there to help take care without the need of a nurse or some special long-term care plan. In Okinawa, there's no word for retirement. By the way, the whole notion of retirement was invented by the Germans under the Kaiser. It's a completely artificial construct between your useful life and then your life of repose. In Okinawa, instead of hitting 65 or 68 or whatever it is, one word imbues your entire adult life. That word is ikigai. And roughly it means the reason for which you wake up in the morning, your sense of purpose. For this 102-year-old karate master, it's passing down martial arts. For this 97-year-old fisherman, he no longer fishes for a profession, but what gets him out of the easy chair every day, out of bed, keeps him active, is spearing a little bit of fish, which he brings to each of his 4 kids' families. It gives him an excuse to interact with his family. For Kamada-san, 102 years old, her ikigai is her great-great-great-granddaughter. These 2 girls are separated in age by 101.5 years, and though this woman is the spiritual leader of her village, when I asked her what it feels like to hold a descendant more than a century younger than her, she said it feels like leaping into heaven. Kind of makes you look forward to getting older, actually. In the United States, we found America's blue zone in a very unusual place, about 80 miles southeast